Hello, this is Marcus Fairs, founder and editor-in-chief of Dezeen, broadcasting live from the Dezeen studio in London. And we have a fascinating discussion today to talk about how software, how technology can influence the world around us and how it can help us build a better world. We're actually launching a collaboration between Dezeen and Dassault Systèmes. And we have from Paris, Asensio, who is the head of design at Dassault Systèmes. Hi there, Anne, can you hear me?
Yes, Marcus, I can hear you fine.
How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm so glad. I'm so honored to be with you today.
And where exactly are you? Are you at home or are you in the studio?
No, I'm in the studio in Paris. We were able actually to open up with a lot of constraints, but open up since May. And so the designers are coming back and forth from their home to the studio. And we want to keep this collaborative spirit and also the motivation. So yes, we are still very much involved in the physical world.
There's a very strong French theme to today's talk because we also have Mamou-Mani from Mamou-Mani Architects, who's not in France, but is down the road from me in Hackney. Hi, Arthur.
Hi, Marcus. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm quarantined at home. So here you go, calling from my home.
And you're quarantined not because you're sick, but because you went to France, and that's the rule these days, right?
It is the rule. So I follow the rule. Yes, here in Hackney Road.
And just briefly, tell us a little bit about your collaboration with Dassault Systèmes, which is going to be the main point of today's talk.
Yeah, Dassault Systèmes reached out. We met in Milan when we did the project with Cos Conifera. And we really started the discussion that was quite aligned. And surprisingly, I think we were very matching in terms of our ideas and in terms of the way we work and the modularity of things. And we'll talk about all that, but we really thought immediately, let's do something together. And then we met again in Paris in their studio. And I presented the work that we do at the office. And I think it was like the rest is history. We collaboration, exactly. Yeah. And so we plan to do a piece at Milan for last session, which was postponed. And we hope to continue this year.
Exactly. And the collaboration between Dezeen and Dassault Systèmes will partly focus on that installation that you weren't able to do in Milan this year. And you've kind of realized it in a visual sense to some extent, but I think there's still a hope and still a plan that this will be realized in the real world.
Yes, definitely, Marcus. What I would like to also mention is what we do with Arthur is just part of a program that we started, and you were part of this partnership together with Dezeen already 2 years ago. So we do that since 4 years in a row. This program is really for Dassault Systèmes the possibility to partners with designers that make the scene of design right now, but also in the particular point of how we can enable and be the catalyst for designers with technology of the wildest dream or wildest installation. So Arthur is just part of a very large story and long story. We will tell you more probably later.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Dassault Systèmes, and also about the company? I mean, it's a huge company, but tell us about your part, the design part of it, and the reason why you do these collaborations with designers.
You know, Dassault Systèmes has been created in '81. So it's really a software company that have moved towards something that is much more than just a software company. It's a milieu, it's a place where people can basically work and collaborate together on the most involved technology, wherever they are virtual reality, virtual universe, 3D, simulation, generative design. All those aspects are basically becoming more and more pregnant in the day-to-day practice of designers. So I joined Dassault Systèmes now 12 years ago. I come from an industrial designer background. I worked for a long time for car companies, GM and Renault. And during that time, I knew how important it was for designers to question their practice And if it looks like natural to question the practice from the side of tools in the side of solution, today we are questioning the practice to a much more aesthetical, ethical level, where we are basically questioning with the dialogue with designers, really what is the role of design within those emerging technology, and what can we take from this dialogue, what can we learn, but not only for just being in this race for more modernity, but maybe to be more in tune to the challenges of our society today. So the studio is working in a regular basis with designers from all over the world. And it's always a pleasure to actually partner with them. And I'm also very pleased that with Dezeen, we were able to meet some of them. And it's also the reason for being here today, all together, the three of us, is to launch probably what may become a very important testimony journey between Dezeen and Dassault Systèmes about how designers basically leverage technology as a catalyst of their thinking and how they change the world, basically.
Yes, and we're going to be producing some movies showing how designers are approaching it from their own particular point of view and how they're using software to help them get there. But tell us a little bit about the specific tools that Dassault Systèmes makes that are appropriate for designers.
Okay, so this may be probably something that will be much easier to express through the presentation we may basically deliver, Arthur and myself, today. But more specifically, we in the design studio are not doing software. I mean, definitely what is important for us is to basically provide, on a philosophical level, the ability of doing a regime of aesthetical and ethical way or journey of design. What it means that the studio is really a place for research, where we are really looking at emerging technology, some coming from Dassault Systèmes, but also from all over the world. And also we are basically doing a collide of those technology within the current practice of designers. Their questions, how they basically imagine new possibilities in their current practice. So we love to actually work around curiosity, a new way of assembly, new, in some cases, I may call it hacking technology approach, to the purpose of putting the thinking of the designers at the center, and not the software as we may imagine, you know, a design studio at Dassault Systèmes may do, the define of technical and engineering solutions. We also do some prescription for those solutions, sure, but we are not doing it by theoretical scientific approach, but really from an experimental, emotional experimentation type of approach for basically delivering something that is not a given. It's more like a proposition, a possibility of change. We do that since 10 years, and we have probably impacted the 3D experience platform. It's not a software, it's actually a space, a design space for creation, for sharing, for trade, for experimentation. So this platform is probably, we can call it the R&B or the Amazon of design. It's really evolving as a living organism by just the fact that there are designers in it working in a search of more ethical and more sustainable design.
And just before we go to the presentation, Anne, I just want to quickly go back to Arthur, or Arthur as I should be pronouncing it. Arthur, tell us, Arthur, since we're predominantly French today, Arthur, tell us a little bit about the other things that you've done, and particularly the work that you do with software. You're very involved in using high technology, aren't you? You're very involved in VR and 3D printing. Tell us a little bit about your studio and the kind of things that you do in that area.
Yeah, and it's such a pleasure to hear Anne. Maybe it's the Frenchness, but to hear someone talk about technology with such passion and on such a almost philosophical ground is something that I find super refreshing. And we were discussing together, saying we don't care about software, we care about humans. And something that I really feel in our office, which I'll show you in the presentation, but To me, technology don't matter unless it helps the planet, unless it has a purpose that is positive. And I think we often get lost in technology for its own sake, software for its own sake. There is a desire to do something complex just because we can, when really what matters is what's the point if it doesn't help the situation that's happening. And there's obviously a lot of problems. I'm sure you're all aware, I'm stuck at home for 2 weeks. If technology is not here to help us get over it and get past this new kind of environmental crisis that we're facing, then really, I don't care about technology. I don't care about software. And that's what our office is focusing on. We're focusing on projects that can make a difference. We try not to point fingers. We try not to be, the system is against us, or we need to, it's more like, what is the project that can show that this material is better, that this material, and what I really loved about this collaboration with Anne is we could put science behind what we're saying. So we could be like, oh, that plastic, and I remember the conversation we had, Marcus, on bioplastic versus real plastic. We can put metrics. We can say, well, that is objectively using scientific metrics better. And I think there is a lot of subjectivity, unfortunately, in the act of the word sustainability. And so it's really great to be able to work with technology in order to measure up our carbon footprint and impact.
Great, and just a little point there for anyone who missed the thing you're talking about last year. We had a big discussion in Milan, didn't we, about bioplastics and biodegradability and standardization and whether they were damaging for the world or good for the world. And actually, I read this morning that the UK is now about to announce biodegradability standards for plastic. So I don't know whether they were listening to that conversation, but some things are definitely slowly moving in the right direction.
Definitely, definitely. And I think this is the policy, the new design policy about the way we are using and sourcing the materials and how we use them, how we discard them. This is basically growing very fast, and it will go through policy and regulation. But it's very important. Designers are at the forefront and testing, and pushing. And even if sometimes we're not clean entirely, we are moving in the right direction, step by step, small steps by small steps.
And this is probably a good point for you to start the presentation. You and Arthur are going to share the presentation, but I think you're starting off.
Yes. Actually, we with Arthur wanted to do this presentation together. So we described this company, Dassault Systèmes, a little bit earlier with the conversation. What I would like to say is what we love to tackle is societal and planetarian challenges. And the way we do it is with technology, for sure. We started as a 3D pioneer. We are today probably a leader in the software company in the industrial era. We like to call us the industrial renaissance catalyst. We have created the 3D experience platform. And what is very important is this platform is named 3D experience platform, coming from experience as a name, as the living of individual humans and humans acting, The purpose of the company, because it's a company with a purpose, and that also help for us to actually interact with people who could be critical about the way we live, is harmonizing product, nature, and life. And this has been the purpose since its creation. And this is very important to see the stability of that purpose, because it creates the perfect environment for designers and innovators to actually involve a spirited way of creating a meaningful habitat for humans. So I don't know if you see me. Yes, we discussed that. We discussed about Milan. I think it was the first time was in 2016. We came up to Milan a little bit like a neophyte, completely unaware of what is so important in terms of the Milano scene. And we started to actually put this program called Design in the Age of Experience. And it was great because we basically started with the 17 sustainable goals. We picked some of them. We had to tackle air pollution, how we can design with data, how we may basically consider to discard plastic in our, in our day-to-day life. And we were able to actually partner with great designers. As you can see here was the installation in 2018 with Kengo Kuma. We also partner with Anab Jane. We partner with Tom Main, Morphosis in California. Patrick Join with some generative design, interesting exploration of generative design. So this is something that we put in place. I was a curator of those exhibits and manifestations since then, and I want to pursue this. And I'm glad that we partner with Dezeen since then. Another thing, if we can come next, is how we do that. When it comes to immersive technology, there are no such thing as a determinant milieu for those technology. What is important is not the technology, is not the software, is the human, is how our narrative are addressing real needs for the population, and the technology come as a support, as a means for those questions. And those questions are eminently human, and that's what we do in the studio. What you can see here is also hybridation, multitasking, multidisciplinary approach of technology. We can mix also virtual reality, immersive reality, augmented reality, but these are just a means. So what is very important, again, is to get the learning and also to imagine what may become the new protocol of design, considering the digital matter as a matter. You know, we use wood, fabric, any material that comes from nature, but the world has become so artificial that today we can say the world is made of digital matter. So it's quite important. Designers need to learn. So we want to be at the forefront of imagining practice for designers with the digital matter. And to do so, it's quite important to keep the spirit of collaboration. And also we want to shift really the posture of design. You know, when we call the design in the past, it was mostly to be part of this consumerism society, and the technology seems to be just an hyper accelerator of consumerism. So we are questioning how we can basically take technology to actually reverse this situation. So that shift is basically to really believe on a human inclusivity into the digital tools, to create dialogue within those digital tools. And this is not, I mean, it's nice to say it, is not easy to do. Basically, the technologists, the scientists, the informatician, mathematician, and the designers don't necessarily work and talk to each other. That's what we try to do. We want to create the mediation between those two worlds, and then to give all of those learning to designers who want to change the world. And that's why we have collaborated with Arthur.
What a nice segue. I'm really happy to hear the ambition to create something holistic. This is our studio on Hackney Road, Mamou-Mani Architects, and also we have a fabrication space, the Fab Pub downstairs. So we're pretty much testing everything we design with physical object, the actual thing. So we're not using a blueprint and then we send it to a contractor and the contractor does it, and then there is this whole risk mess. We try and be the general contractor, the makers of our project. And for me, that's a very important step towards creating the holistic renaissance, let's say, that Anne was talking about, where designers regain control over their design and how these designs could integrate every field of our profession. So the engineers, the designer, the makers, the designer, the people doing the regulations are also the designer. The idea that everything is design is super important to our ethos and the way we do things. And that's why we're all downstairs with machines instead of being just with computers. So like Anne was saying, I really enjoyed with the Dassault Systèmes platform that it was also a way to have access to fabricators, have access to software designers, have access to architects and designers, because that holistic nature of design is how cathedrals were built. The idea that the master builders were here, the stonemasons were here, everyone was together in an empirical loop of trial and error, doing positive mistakes, learning from failure really fast before we get to build the actual thing. And even when we build the actual thing, it's not over. The idea of disassembly is something that I find really relevant to today's circular economy. So this was at the Sir John Soane Museum. We put a robot in there. It's in London. The idea of this project was to create a robot that could scale up to assemble and disassemble skyscrapers. Our office is inside a container, a shipping container. We have about 5 of them. And so we are growing when we need, and we degrow when we don't need them. What that means is we adapt to the economy. We're not constrained to a certain space. I'm sure you hear the stories of people building skyscrapers when the economic boom is happening, and then when the boom is over, the skyscrapers are empty. That is, to me, an aberration, because nature doesn't do that. When a plant doesn't have water, it dies, and then another plant grows somewhere else. This is what nature does, and this is how designers of tomorrow need to start thinking, from the origin of materials all the way to the disassembly and what happens to the materials after that. And in that same spirit, this project from last year, Conifera with COS, was thought as a complete life cycle, from the bioplastic being used, which is grown from renewable material. It's called PLA, polylactic acid, made from fermented sugar, all the way to the composting. However, even kind of more interesting, since now I can talk about it, the pieces were partially composted, but really people wanted the modules, and they're like, why are you destroying them even? Why can't we have them? And so we had a talk at COS at the company, and then all the employees, or at least everyone that could have one, got one. And what happened is they ended up in people's garden, growing tomatoes on them. They ended up being a table for a few. And I thought what was really nice is this idea of gift economy, the idea that we think of a project as something that can dissolve through gifting. And this modularity is really, really important in order to achieve that, because modularity means pre-assembly, means being able to test at a smaller scale. Our studio is not big. We're in London, you know, I can't have warehouse for a cheap price, so we have a really constrained studio. So modules mean that you can actually design with small scale the final thing. And so this is a project we did with Chris Frecht, an amazing architect from Austria, who loves collaboration as well. And for us, the idea that one architect can solve it is not going to happen. It's all of us have to work together, have to put our ego to the side a bit. And that's what I really loved with Chris. We thought together, okay, we're going to do a project in Saudi Arabia. And we both talk about the environment. Like, is there an issue in this very statement? And we're like, you know what? If we're going to do a transition from, say, the petrol age to an age of circular economy, then maybe we can help by, again, using a project to show what's possible. So we found a factory that did sand printing, and they do sand printing for casting, metal casting. And we looked at this octet truss, which is a truss that Alexander Graham Bell developed, and Buckminster Fuller as well. And then we kind of printed it in sand, which was absolutely crazy. Clients thought it would never happen, and we did it, and we were very happy. Of course, it broke. Of course, some pieces didn't. So, but we tend to try and accept failure. We tend to try and accept that if we innovate, we're going to fail, we're going to learn. And that spirit of celebrating this empirical imperfection is very key to the work. So this is Galaxia. This is the temple for Burning Man, 2018. And it was a temple for everyone. So it didn't have a religion allocated to it. It was built by 140 volunteers over the course of 6 months. But in the desert, we had about 18 days to finish this building, which is about 60 meters wide and 20 meters high. And you can see that it's occupied by people. It's a building that's not about the design as such, as an object. It's a building that's like a sponge. It receives people. It creates a lattice for people to place things, to place offerings, to let go, to realize that they're humans, that they're connected to other humans. And it's a spirituality that's very non-secular, which I find very interesting and inclusive. One of the Burning Man principle is radical inclusion. So it's very important, I think, to speak about that now and to create places of radical inclusion. So part of that process was the build. So this was a project that's way bigger than anything we've ever done before. And so the idea of doing prototyping at that scale needed to come with a sense of volunteer friendliness. And we had such a complexity. That is the first time I came across the tools from Dassault Systèmes. This is, for example, SolidWorks, you see on the top left, which I actually didn't know that Dassault Systèmes had this in their network of tools. And what we simulated here was the impact of, say, the scaffolding and how it clashes with the base plate. We cannot dig the desert. So we had to come up with an idea of how to restrain the piece from spreading on its own load. It's 100 tons of wood on top of this. But that restraint has to be thought with the scaffolding, with the volunteer sequence, the entire plan of action. We're also fundraising for it at the same time. So all these challenges that are happening all at once, we need tools, we need ways to collaborate in a way that is across continents. And so in that sense, this was a team effort to a level that I've ever experienced before. Really, this is the 140 people from the design team to the engineers team to the metal workers to like the kitchen crew. You know, the kitchen crew alone was 10 people, and they were to some extent also the designers. Everyone is the designer. Designer should not be stuck to the idea of a concept. I think design is in everything, is in everywhere, and that is a very important aspect of the work we do. In that same spirit, these are projects that we haven't really published too much. I mean, we talked about it in Dezeen a bit. This was the project we were meant to do at Burning Man this year, an amphitheater, a fractal amphitheater that turns the idea of an amphitheater on its own head, because it's an amphitheater for everyone to perform. So there's no spectator or performer, there's no central space. As such, everything can be seen as a central space for performance. And the image on the left is our latest project, which was for the Silicon Valley icon. And the idea was to create a space where a restaurant would serve the food that grows in the structure itself. So these are just two projects that I wanted to show before we introduce you to the new project with Dassault Systèmes. And I will let you take over from there if you want.
Well, actually, again, perfectly, Dean, but you know, it's like all the time, you know, you start a sentence, I can finish it, or vice versa. Okay, if we want to change the world, we may do it together. And some of the aspects of the 3D experience platform, as you see a slide here, is just like a snapshot of our long list of conversation and discussion on the project between Arthur and the studio. It's basically the notion of inclusivity and ubiquity. Inclusivity because we think that the co-creation will give the power to the community. We need to have the ability to offer to not just a designer a tool to do something, but actually to embrace the design project across all of the team in a multidisciplinary way. And our challenge is to do it also virtually. What basically what Arthur was showing within the, Burning Man effort, how we can do that within a platform. So the 3D experience platform spirit is really there. It's based on community. Each community is basically a project, team members, could be people inside, outside. And it's very important to imagine that this is really what will make in movement the new practice of design. Because when it comes to the societal challenges we were discussing earlier, what is quite important is we need to basically offer to the designers the possibility to learn beyond to what they currently know. Because imagination can only be nourished by new knowledge and new know-how, and those knowledge and new know-how can only be brought by just like cross-fertilization. So those designers need to be placed into a milieu where those information could come from anywhere, including and certainly more specifically scientific tools. But we want to stop this Descartes, French philosopher, separation between the guys who think, the guys who does things, the doing and thinking typical opposition. And this is really what this platform is tackling. The other aspect is complexity. What Arthur was showing is even in the scope of the work he's doing, the complexity of what we want to tackle are getting so big, so huge, that we need to keep sight and keep as designers this holistic view. So this requires that we need to start to model system in a way that we still keep sight of what we are doing. So this aspect of complexity could be basically leverage and propose through tools, the generative design tools, calculation, computation, but we need to have designers who learn how to use those tools. Simulation, maybe we can move to the next slide. Simulation, this is something incredible. Designers used to basically work in this invisible state. The thinking used to be invisible. What is quite interesting is there was something even more invisible, is all of the things that designers could imagine in the black box of their creativity, that today we can reinforce those imagination through simulation. But if you do that very early at the stage of design, when you really starting to just imagine what you are basically doing, what your installation means, what is the purpose, you basically can already place in the virtual world in 3D with simulation. You have the ability to make many variation, many different type of assembly, and still in a very light and ubiquitous, I don't know how it is in English, but a space where you can basically see from any place, any location, any area. The design for life, if I go further, and maybe we will come back to this, the Design for Life is the program the studio is running for now 10 years. And what it means that we definitely need to offer to the designer the ability to have a sense for their imagination. Basically, beyond the narrative, we want to go to the imaginary representation on virtual universe. Why we want to do this? Because this is the only way we can transform the structure of our world. Only imagination translating into new representation may lead to the intent to change something. This is always being at the very heart of what is really the meaning of design. And the tool of representation, 3D, super high-end rendering, will help to make very sensible and sustainable decision in design. And it's probably the only way to not use those tools for a prediction, because that's basically what engineering is doing. You know, they are using those tools to predict how a structure may behave, or how basically a construction may basically deliver its certification KPIs on CO2. No, what is very important to imagine is this can give you more than just the prediction on scientific tools. It can actually get your imagination run to different alternative, other variable of decision. And this is really huge when you consider that we have to tackle, maybe if I want to mention Tony Fry, not sustainability, but the sustainment of the world. So for doing this, maybe we have one more slide, I think, and maybe after we can start the conversation. Okay, very dry engineering slide, right? But this slide is really important. All along the program we did with Arthur, that means when we started to decide to do this installation for Milan, all the way to the moment, and we still open because the installation not have been basically settled in Milan, and we hope in May in the next future. This is basically tracking what we call the life cycle assessment of the full or the full operation or the full installation. And that is really offering to the designer not just a responsibility, they already know they have this responsibility, but actually they learn how to question what they bring to life when they do something. This is really at the heart of sustainability. And how do you know that what you are bringing to life is going to be sustainable or not? So that basic question is being for often an open, nice, naive question. Now we can just bring some highly scientific tools to help designers to actually have a total view and control and responsibility into the integrity of the design they bring to life. Do you want to add something, Arthur, about this LCA sustainability assessment?
Yeah, so life cycle analysis or life cycle assessment is a way to fully quantify your decision making when you're a designer in relation to its environmental cost. Often the environmental cost is not in the equation because financial cost is our only way to measure value. And really, this idea of, say, a carbon tax or something that would implement the environmental cost in the equation is something that's key to changing the current situation. You know, plane travels are extremely cheap. Why is that when they create, you know, 4 tons of carbon per trip? Like, so how do you measure this? How do you know the true value of something in relation to the planet? For us, that's the only way that one will appreciate the living things for what they are and change our relationship to living things. This is, I love, you know, I'm quite geeky, and I think I sent you that, Marcus, as soon as I discovered, because I was so excited that we could finally put some numbers on a debate we've had for a couple of years. And as you know, I remember when something is controversial or when something is questioned, I dig into it. You know, I'm the first one to say that I'm learning about things that I'm not sure, but really the intuition initially is something that is lovely to prove with actual numbers. And when you see those green and blue, blue is conventional plastic and green is PLA, bioplastic. And you see that the more it goes outwards, the better it is for the environment, right? So you can see that petroleum-based plastic has some advantages on water use and land use, for sure. However, it's a renewable, which means that you can grow it without taking petrol from the earth. What happens is you have extremely good stats on respiratory toxicity. You know, we burn a lot of stuff in our waste process. But when you burn plastic, I think it's about 60 times worse than burning bioplastic. So for your lungs, it's actually pretty bad, which is very relevant today. And you can see this. You don't measure things in terms of it's better or it's worse. You have dimensions of assessment. Things are multi-dimensioned, and that's what this diagram shows. And so
I would like to, no, after I see your enthusiasm, this is very important to actually consider on the holistic approach of sustainability. Our intent is actually to capture a footprint to enable handprint. And that's the type of philosophy that we have. Handprint is deliver the responsibility to actually bring something, to do something, handprint, with a footprint in mind. And this is really what these 2 colors actually indicate in a much more holistic way, because decision-making are actually not gray. They are not black or white, they are definitely gray. There are one more thing that is quite important that this scheme is actually showing is the fact that what is quite important is those decisions have to make very early in the process. And typically today, most of those approaches are basically validation or confirmation of what we may have done right or not. Where here it's the ability to do it very early in the process of design, maybe even before any sourcing of material or before any real engagement of resources are being made, to decide or to foresee what may be the impact into the to the planet on different metrics. So this initiality of the process, it shifts everything. It's a real shift toward what we call upstream thinking. That means thinking upstream, all of what you do. And that basically is something that currently being done in the engineering phase. We should engage designers in those scope of actions. And this is really what we did with Arthur. And we're very pleased that this solution may be more and more used in the near future. By designer, by engineers, by everyone.
No, hello.
And Arthur, could we just go back a couple of images there? Because I'd like, if you don't mind, without, I know some aspects of this project are confidential, but are these images of the project that you're going to do with Dassault Systèmes? And if so, can you explain what the project is?
Yeah, of course. So this is Aurora. It's the new sunrise, and it's a new post, COVID project. It wasn't meant to be post-COVID, but it is now. But it's a project that we've developed in a similar continuation to this modular thinking that I was discussing before. This is a project that uses bioplastic that is 3D printed into these modules, a sort of partition module that creates a flow that goes as a journey from the entrance to the exits and allow people to learn about the technology, but in a way that is engaging. And so this is an image from the top view of the different modules. I have some behind me. I'm sure I'll get a chance to show them to you. We want to make sure that we show the accessibility of this technology. So we will have a 3D printer on site like we had for Conifera, but this time we also have a crusher, which is a plastic crusher that we have in our studio now because we now recycle our plastic. And we want to show that this can also be accessible. And so we want to teach in a way and learn together with people going through this project.
It's very important. If I may complete this proposition from the process of our intent, Marcus, was to actually do the first experiment of what may become a sustainability design practitioner. We often talk about circular economy. We know and discuss a lot among designers on eco-design. Here we wanted to take the full process of doing the installation, questioning all of the aspects, starting with the material, the PLA, starting with the way we basically take this material into life through different, like Arthur is showing, different way of testing the 3D print machine by creating different programs and creating some hazardous, very interesting, pattern. But also to also think about assembly, disassembly, recyclability in the process of doing it. And all of the things that are often taken separately, we wanted to take them all in once. And it's really the journey we want to offer to the audience, is the ability to actually work through a question of how do you basically set up a space with materials and mise en œuvre in French, that may be completely new and may question the way we may basically in the future create our way of living, our habitat, and how we can basically craft our spaces. This image, by the way, it's a virtual image, okay? Just for making sure they are. And it's probably something that when you are designing, Arthur, it's hard to see the final result before you actually see the installation. So that's been also, for us also, the way we were basically doing those images, they are very close to scientific condition. They are not like rendering as we usually do in design, but we try to actually capture the exact aspect of the material.
This is,
and you may explain, Arthur, you should explain maybe the difference of the aspect of material and why it is like that.
And actually, could you unshare the presentation now, because Arthur was holding up the components, but I don't think our audience saw them. So maybe Arthur, could you hold them up again and explain exactly what we're looking at? So you're looking at failure, intentional failure of a print. We're basically playing with what's called the GCode. The GCode is a general code. It's a code that you send to the machines. And because we send it straight from the tools, we're actually able to control or try to control our failures. So you can see here, this one, a segment was omitted, and you can see the whole thing collapse, a little bit like a sediment layer that collapses on itself. There are really, really interesting failures. I don't know if you can see them here, but basically the print is developing a language of its own. And I find this really fascinating. You see, I'm showing stuff. Every time we were playing, I would bring a ton of prototypes at the studio, and we would discuss them together to see what's beautiful, what's not, how did the machine kind of create unexpected moments. Can we kind of use that? Can we display the diversity of failures that we have? And this idea of celebrating failures and letting go of a preconception of a design, I think will be very important to that piece. So we will put the failed piece at the very top at eye level for people to appreciate that failure with us. And actually those failures are plenty opportunity to do plenty of new ideas. There are a lot of already learnings that could become great design in the future. So just to clarify, Arthur, so these are 3D printed components which will be made on site and then assembled into some kind of structure, and they're made using PLA, polylactic acid, right, which is a biodegradable bioplastic.
No, it's compostable, not biodegradable.
Compostable.
Yeah, and that's very important, because remember the idea that you can biodegrade is really the danger with this material, and people don't know the difference. And compostability means you have an industrial composting facility that takes care of your. So even for us to actually be able to compost is a difficulty, because to find a composting bin that accepts them is quite challenging. So people need to be actually proactive in understanding composting. We're lucky in Milan, there is the largest composting facility in Europe. But really what's interesting is not to compost, is to create modules that people want to keep, and people that can reconfigure these modules into, we use them now as COVID screens in our office, for example, just to give you a sense of their modularity. They're very generic. They are circular and arc because our machine has a bed that is circular. It is also a kind of way for us to create a movement in the space that is not just a straight wall. And it allows us to play with the different types of modules that we have to create an effect of something that flies away and takes you to a journey with you. So we're going to print it on site in the different fabrication spaces that helped us build Conifera. And so it's going to be what we call distributed manufacturing. So we don't build the full thing. We have a whole team, Wasp Hub, that's going to help print next to the site to minimize transportation.
And the diagram you showed, you were comparing PLA against ABS, which is the plastic that's usually used in 3D printing on various sustainability measures. But the bioplastic isn't perfect, is it? It's better, but it isn't perfect. So if you're trying to move towards a circular economy, which I assume you are, how do you mitigate the gap between perfection and the reality of that material? And how can technology help you do that?
I love that question, because I think perfectionism can be the enemy of innovation. A lot of time we look for the ultimate solution, and therefore we ignore the different progresses that allows us to do a step-by-step progress. And so I didn't know that PLA was that bad in terms of land use. I find this interesting because it makes you rethink, how do we grow it? Which crop should we use? Can we do vertical farming? And so that's the kind of question that it raises. So it's not perfect, it's better for sure, but it raises new question about other aspects of the industrialization process towards a green industry, really.
Very good answer, Arthur, because, you know, Marcus, it is true that we need to leave the prediction and determinisms in terms of materials we may use. Step by step, you know, it's not just the material by itself, it's also the way you are basically transforming this material. So the intent with this installation and this collaboration was to actually take any aspect, you know, from the ideation all the way to the crusher, and maybe the So those learnings will basically help us to actually be more accurate. First, in terms of choices when you do a design, methodology, as Arthur is doing. But for us, as a software company, we may learn, you know, the traps and the no-go issues that you know, those experiments is helping us to actually nurture the tools with those learnings. Because one of the things that we currently have when it comes to predict sustainability in a circular economy is the material, you know, the data, you know, and we don't know much. So as much as we will be doing that type of experiment with people like Arthur, more we will be educating our tools and solution for better controlling the sustainable process.
And Arthur, you mentioned vertical farming there. Does that mean that you've learned that obviously bioplastic, you have to grow the plastic somewhere, you have to produce a crop and then turn that into bioplastic? So are you exploring how you could grow that in vertical farms? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think the future, or at least what we've noticed with COVID, is that things are out of reach. And therefore it causes problem when there is an issue like COVID. We need things to be decentralized more. We need to have access to machines to make things like the masks that everyone was doing during the crisis of the PPE for COVID. So we realized very quickly that we are in need of distributing the means of production. And that is such an important aspect of the circular economy, to bring back factories to people, to bring back farming to people, to have this decentralization of accessing your resources, let alone the waste. And the waste as well, the waste needs to be here. We need to have the machines to recycle in-house. And so this decentralization of tools is something that we're pushing, and that includes the right crop to generate the right starch, the right sugar, to create the plastic that we can then compost or crush in-house to do other stuff. And this decentralization will allow us to have control and be able to actually be more creative at the end of the day and be more empowered in the stuff we consume. We become prosumers rather than consumers.
But just back to that specific point. So does that mean we need to look at alternatives to traditional farming to produce all the bioplastic we might need?
So it's a very good point. And I think we know very little about farming, as I'm a city boy, really. I come from Paris, then I moved to London. So I really don't want to say that I know much about the quantity of land we need to farm and actually feed people, because that again requires really precise metrics. But we are exploring, and I teach at University of Westminster, and our students are exploring different kinds of crop that generate different kinds of starch in order to look at what it is that is less impactful, in order to not take down rainforests, in order to grow the plastic that we think is sustainable. If the plastic we get comes from a country that doesn't have regulated forestry or sustainable forestry, then it defeats the point. And that's why it's such a big system that one needs to think of. And that's why it takes so long to learn about these things, and it's really one step at a time.
And again, I want to go back to the ability that we may have to actually trace, have a tracking device that actually will help you to precisely know, where this plastic is being made, where it's being made, how it's being made. And there are another aspect that we didn't discuss is we only talk about the PLA and biomass, but we may expect that such of those search may basically tackle on other materials, maybe coming from allergies or coming from any materials that is currently being completely discarded into the nature and not being used. So this is really important, that we can not just come up as a solution and really learn and gather those learning to actually anticipate how to basically select and source those materials up front. The agriculture by itself is probably a project that is beyond the design scope, but it may be on the scope of the industry. It may, yeah, exactly. If you connect the designer to the industry, then it's a different story.
Were you going to say something then, Alpha? You were waving.
No, like I was mentioning, I think it's a challenge for all of us, whether we're designers in a conventional sense or just general public. I think the awareness of these issues need to come from a curiosity of the individual. I think we need to gain back the curiosity that we lost when we were just consumers. When we go to the supermarket, buy something, that's not knowing where it comes from. That's just, yeah. We lost track
of what is the world is made of. Okay, we are just we think it just comes from nowhere. It's time to actually open up our eyes and our senses, and again, this is probably our lines, but I think the reason we were not taking into attention those aspects is because they were invisible or just very complicated and difficult to visualize. And the visualization of those issues, this ability to actually question and deep dive and test furthermore any things we do and bring to the nature, should basically deliver more material for designers to think, to learn, and to be more proactive in the way they do and design. So it could be not just on the material by itself. It's quite a tough topic. We didn't discuss. There's something on material, Arthur, we didn't discuss here, but we were getting into the chemical, biological texture and structure of it, because they're also something that we tested at a micro level. It didn't learn much for us, but we tested on a micro level at Dassault Systèmes. We tried the PLA and we tested the PLA biodegradability in ocean. We were able to actually do a span of time that was very, very, very long. And we knew how not good it was, but at least we knew. So it's better to know than not knowing.
We've got a few questions from the audience. I'll see how many of these I can get through in the next 5 minutes. The first one, Anjito asks, what happened to your arm, Marcus? Well, I have to say, I just had a metal plate removed from my arm. I broke my wrist a couple of years ago, so I'm fine, actually. This will be removed in 2 weeks, and hopefully I'll be back to normal. Thank you for asking. Laurie asks, how close are we to being able to implement this technique of on-site design and 3D printing on a mass scale? What are the barriers? And I guess that also refers back to the first question I asked you, Arthur, which is that, we all want solutions to the problems of the world. And you basically said, well, look, this isn't perfect, but at least it's an experiment that gives us some data that can help us get towards that. And the problem often is that in the meantime, there's this kind of massive bureaucracy of commercially driven system that doesn't want innovation, that threatens its model. An idea like this, an idea like distributed manufacturing, 3D printing of bioplastics, how do you get that to be taken up in a grand scale? Or are we not ready yet because we're not sure, we're still experimenting with it?
It's a fantastic question. Like, really, it's down to the point. There are barriers we're facing, and that, for example, I'll tell you one, and this is a call for everyone, all the readers. We need to fireproof this, and we saw it, in different ways when plastic is not really a material for construction. In fact, it's pretty bad, and so we need to think of how to fireproof processes. And this leads me to things like earth printing. We're exploring things like earth printing, clay printing, but even that requires to be kilned. And so, of course, there is concrete printing, but concrete is still raising on all kinds of issues. So really, fireproofing of PLA, I think, is the next step for this technique. The machines are already available. It takes a lot of teaching. It takes a lot of showing. That's the purpose of this project. So this project is also to show the possibilities. But really, barrier fireproofing of PLA and starting to think about earth printing, modularity, and it's just also knowing the constraints of these machines in order to develop modules that make sense at a construction scale. So I think that will require a kind of research on the constraints of the machine versus the design of the modules and the understanding of the materials we're using. So it will, step by step, I give classes, they're open to you guys, but I really think that it will take a lot of collaboration, that's why we made the call for, I don't know if you remember, we asked for game designers for our past piece. It seems to be great to ask for help, and I'm keen to ask for help. Any ideas from this discussion that you guys were inspired to, please message us. We're gonna do this together, not alone.
And I guess by fireproofing, you mean literally preventing a PLA structure from catching fire easily.
Yeah, correct. Plastic has a tendency to catch fire very easily. And you can fireproof with epoxies and really bad stuff, but really we need to learn how to fireproof things, not with bad stuff. And it's possible, there are metals that you can put in. What happens to the compostability? There's a lot of research to be had. This is a new material, so that's really a line of research that's a really important one. So this is my call for action for that. And then we can also start researching earth printing, because earth is the most sustainable material there is.
And another question from Sophie. Sophie asks, how do we get around the challenge of plastic? And I guess she means traditional fossil fuel-based plastic being durable and easy maintenance, and therefore a cost-effective option for clients. I mean, this is a problem, isn't it? Because plastic is amazing in lots of ways.
It's so good at keeping things fresh, and the whole line of health, and we know it. We all use masks. Unfortunately, we realize our dependence to plastic is still here. and it's fantastic at doing certain things. Just like, you know, oil is actually good at certain things. And to be honest, we need to learn what things are good at and not try to, again, find perfection. We need to put the metrics that Anne was talking about, but it's complex equation. It's really hard to do a life cycle analysis. And that's why it's so nice to partner with technological firms that can offer these solutions. And I say this very genuinely, you know, this is not a marketing thing. Like, this is genuinely helpful to have people that help quantify the problems we have.
I would like to add something that actually bridge with the other questions about something that goes beyond, you know, one can prevent for getting to a more distributed industry. The investment in capital in the current industry is so huge that it's going to take time. In one hand, the designers have to basically final proofing, you know, all of the aspect of using the plastic the way Arthur is doing it. But on the other hand, the industry have to start a frugal endeavor of changing, you know, the heavy capitalistic approach towards something that they will have no choice. More we go, we probably will have to have more and more incentive for the industry. It's the same for the mobility and the electrical cars to actually be more frugal. So we can hope that at a given time, with more assessment, with more learning from both sides, we may find a space where it will not just eradication of plastic. It will be just a much more meaningful use of it. Yeah. For only when it's really, really where we're going to have the most of its value, but not as we do, where plastic is everywhere for no meanings. It's just like absolutely useless. And it's because we have those heavy capital of industry that use plastic without considering, you know, what will come next. So I think there are two things that what Arthur is doing is this kind of very pragmatic answer you made about, you know, the proofing of PLA, so we can, you know, we will be rolling the ball about those experiences, but actually it raised a bigger question about questioning the industry. And by fact, this is exactly what the industry needs.
And we have one final question from Lisa, which is, we've kind of covered it anyway, but I'll ask it. How do you connect designers with industry without the pressure of the big dominating industries wanting to change? And I think this is something I've seen changed in the architecture and design world in the last 10 years. Lots of designers want to be the agents of change. They want to be small players. They want to innovate. They want to come up with new solutions. But at some point, that needs to feed into the big corporations, or the big players, the legislations. How do we enable that to happen? How can you help through your Dassault Systèmes operations, Anne? How can we help these ideas rise to the top?
Well, two things, two answers. One, you need to basically consider that the virtuality of working and doing the design into a world where nothing is already impacting the real world. Typically, thinking your design, testing your design, imagining all the variation of your design, you know, through generative computational solution, or to experiment, as Arthur is doing, by doing iteration from virtual to real 3D, back to 3D print, then to Crusher, back to 3D print, and so on. This is really what you want to do, to actually have the ability, or give the ability to not just a designer, for corporation to rethink themselves, to have a renaissance of themselves, by just doing much more of what they're currently doing by just optimization or regeneration of what they always have done. This is the opportunity for them to think from fresh perspectives. And the second part is thinking from fresh perspective, because you have those virtual tools, those immersive tools, those 3D tools, those simulation tools that allow you to actually make decisions very early before you get into the real world, your prototype or anything. You need designers in it. And they start to realize that, because the technology alone, it's nothing. You need that human collaborative and co-creation, co-intelligence. And designers are really good in creating the narrative between the technology and the societal means and the societal issues and challenges that you know, we are facing. So companies will see that virtuality lead then to we need designers, because virtuality means making fiction. Fiction is narrative. Narrative is about design. And it's not there yet. They are starting to actually doing intensive transformation. The digital transformation, as we call it in Dassault Systèmes, is not just using Skype, Zoom, and so on. No, it's actually putting your processes, your knowledge into a digital form. Then it could be shared to anyone. Then anyone can design with it. Okay, and that's really this digital transformation that is happening with the industry. And the next step is we need to place the designers in this area. So really, those two movements are concurrent.
Okay, can I answer to Lucy as well? Lucy, no one wants to be, and excuse my French, an asshole, right? I think when you ask people and companies, do you consider the environmental crisis a problem? I don't think anyone will tell you, or at least not in the places or the kind of companies I ask, no one will say, I don't care about it. And if they say this, then maybe not, don't work with them. But most of the time, people will say, of course I care, you know? And if they care, then it's good to actually raise that question very early on. And if they do care, then you can start really saying, well, how about that material? Remember how you told me you cared, you know? And so that's the little steps that then will grow. And then no one in that corporation at all scales will say, you know, why are we doing this? And if they answer, well, it's better for the planet. And people are like, oh, okay, that's good. Because I think everyone wants to help, you know?
And to add on just, and one word, what Arthur was saying, Lucy, is you need to understand how works a company, you know, what their process are being, and you are able to actually provide a regeneration of those processes, exactly as Arthur is doing it. You have to bring this kind of a curiosity and freshness and experimentation way to the company. Right now, they don't know where they're going. They're desperate for answers. So if you are a designer, if they say, yeah, we're interested, but we don't know how to do it, you may basically helping them.
I think that's a brilliant point to end on. Thank you very much, Anne and Arthur. And that is, as I said, just the beginning of a collaboration between Dezeen and Dassault Systèmes, which will involve some movies coming up. Arthur is going to do a workshop and will hopefully culminate in us all seeing the installation in Milan in April. Yeah. Thank you both very, very much. And I look forward to taking the conversation on further.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Arthur.
Thank you, Anne. Bye-bye.